There's a moment on Charlie Kirk's most recent YouTube video where a caller calls in about her son espousing anti Semitic viewpoints and she's quite concerned for him. Where Charlie could make the distinction about the actions of the Israeli government, perhaps, which is what her son may be concerned with, versus anti Semitism, a hatred for the entire Jewish community. Because I've seen this on campus when I was in university and in just general life, people espousing views against the Israeli government and then slowly conflating them with the Jewish people as a whole.
My question, my young adult son's eyes were open to a lot of the lies during COVID and Biden, Trump, and that made me thrilled that he's questioning things. But now I'm hearing things from him that it makes me fear for his discernment. For example, he expressed some anti-Semitic takes on history that maybe Hitler's motives for wanting to be rid of the Jews weren't so wrong, even if how he went about it was evil. And my fear is that in going from one extreme to another, trusting the mainstream media and government to now questioning or distrusting everything, he's believing different lies. So I'd like to know where he's getting these lies. I've heard a little bit about the groypers from Not the Bee. I'd never heard that term before. So my question to you is this: do you know some of the names of the influencers who are taking advantage of the conservative youth movement?
So this is an opportunity. If I were Charlie Kirk in that moment, I would say, listen, I'm not here to name names of who your son may be following or where this information may be coming from. The broader question is that your son just may not be exposed to the real danger of, having views that are against the actions of the Israeli government, but making sure that that's not against the Jewish people. It's okay to criticize a government for its actions, especially when those actions may be undertaken towards innocent civilians. It may be destabilizing the region. There's a real healthy criticism that can come with more and more information about what's happening in the Middle East. And that should be encouraged, I think. It leads to healthy debate. But it's that inflection point where the actions of the Israeli government are confused with anti-Semitism. But Charlie takes a very different approach, and I'm going to share with you what Charlie's approach is.
And so this is a huge challenge because, of course, we should question and we should find baseline truth. However, if you dig so deep past foundational reality, you start to all of a sudden it becomes very transgressive. It's addictive because it becomes so taboo. And so, for example, Holocaust denial is illegal in Europe. Should it be illegal? No. Is it repulsive from the pit of hell? Yes. And this is a major challenge it's mostly young white men. I'm guessing that your son's a white man, I'm guessing. And
Yes.
Just shot in the dark. Now, one of the reasons why it's a challenge for young white conservative disposed men is because they feel as if they have to keep on peeling back the onion to find a conspiracy when in reality there might not always be one.
I don't agree with his approach to this question at all. He says that young conservative white men are peeling back an onion to find the conspiracy, almost like they're searching the internet for the conspiracy and then jumping on that conspiracy and sharing it more widely. But to say that's part of a broader trend, I think that delegitimizes people's legit concerns with the government of Israel. And this is, again, the perfect opportunity to make sure that distinction is being made. You see, when you start saying that, well, if you're espousing those views, you must be conspiratorial, you must be going to the dark corners of the web, to me, you're actually fanning the flames and pushing someone to the dark corners of the web where they can speak, quote, freely about this topic. And anti-Semitism is something here in Canada, the United States, we've struggled with for over 100 years at the very least. And I anticipate that will continue if this distinction isn't made more openly, especially by conservatives.
Is a much better way, which is you have to, of course, acknowledge that the Israeli government does not do everything right. Who does? You have to apologize for it. But number two, they're not to blame for all of the world's ills either. This particular affliction blames the Jews for everything. There is knowledge, they say, and by the way, there is knowledge that is secret and correct. Like 15 years ago, immigration is a disaster for America. They don't integrate and they exploit our system. That was basically secret knowledge as well. It was secret knowledge to simply say that white men are discriminated against college. However, at times, and we see this with the Jew hatred, there is just this momentum that is occurring where people think that they're onto something, but in reality, they're not. And unfortunately, these are a lot of people that need to be told to start taking responsibility for their own actions and don't blame other people for your problems, especially a group of people that is 0.02% of the world's population. And here's where it gets people very angry. It is fundamentally a liberal attitude to blame other people for your problems.
Charlie does something interesting here. He starts saying that people are blaming Jews for all their problems. And you see, when that distinction isn't made between the actions of the Israeli government and Jewish people as a whole, then people quickly twist their discontent, say, for the United States continuously backing the Israeli government, to then make a broader statement about Jewish people and a Jewish conspiracy. It twists them from legitimate criticisms of a government into racial and religious hatred. And, it's interesting. The problem isn't like asking questions. I think that's healthy and important, but it's that we can't ask certain questions and those certain questions have to remain off limits. Like, we can't ask certain questions about the actions of the Israeli government. It's interesting. You never see many conservative voices talk critically about how Israel may actually be doing things to destabilize the region and keep the United States in a position where it's consistently funding its war machine. Like, to me, that's a legitimate criticism. Like the actions of Israel, even more recently in Iran. Like, there's a legitimate conversation to have about how the United States taxpayer is funding Israel in the region, and the government of Israel is doing things that will keep them in perpetual conflict with so many of its neighbors. I think that the United States people have a right to say, hey, I don't know if this is something we as a country find as strategically important, especially when they're not playing by our rules and we're funding them to the nth degree. And so this is an example where the mother could potentially ask their son to maybe ask more informed, more curious-driven questions instead of definitive statements, especially about an entire group. So if she's noticing that her son is espousing anti-Semitism, well, I would push my son to be like, well, how are the actions of that government representative of the entire Jewish community? How could you make that assessment? What evidence do you have? And then you'll find that, when you listen to extreme voices, you start getting tied in knots because they don't have answers to those really tough questions.
I'm not going to tell you the influencers here on air. I know who obviously they all are here, Bonnie. But here's the best way to respond. Make sure that he finds, let's say, people such as myself or even Matt Walsh that have a much more reasonable approach to these issues, because it's very tempting to engage. And yet I hate the term conspiracy theory because so many conspiracy theories have turned up. But it is very tempting to engage in, let's just say, deep internet theories that are constantly have the goalposts changing, that quite honestly are rooted in lunacy and rooted in complete nonsensical type stuff. It is more helpful to first take a step back and say, what exactly do you believe and why do you believe it? I find this is a symptom of being hyper online.
So I think he has a point there at the end about, for being online so much, but he also tells the person to tune into himself or Matt Walsh, where, again, I've demonstrated that Charlie doesn't go into as much detail about making that distinction. So this person will have to replace like anti-Semitic Facebook groups or whatever group he's part of with Charlie Kirk, who, again, I don't think does good justice to what's really happening and the root causes of what's happening. So very interesting that I see this a lot on the right. They don't really answer the question of anti-Semitism, like what's at the root, and they don't criticize the Israeli government enough, specifically about the actions it's taking to undermine peace and stability in the region. But I'd love to know what you think. Do you agree with Charlie on this? Let me know what you think in the comment section below.